I think your point that you're getting these solicitations in the mail is exactly why we're holding this workshop. I think we're all getting solicitations in the mail for community solar. And that's why we've invited Rebecca Perkins Kwoka to join us tonight. Rebecca is the Vice President and General Counsel of ReWild Renewables and Sunrays Investments, and has been in the solar business for quite a long time. Rebecca traveled all the way from across the river in Portsmouth, where she is also a state senator in the New Hampshire legislature. And we're really grateful that you took some time tonight to answer questions like, what the heck is community solar? How does it work? And why is this such a big deal?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I feel like I get imported into Kittery every once in a while just to talk to you guys about issues. I remember joining an event here about housing a couple of years ago as a city councilor in Portsmouth. So I have worked exclusively in solar for about 4 years now, and I've been working in renewables since about 2014, which, believe it or not, in the field of renewables makes me a real veteran. So I'm happy to be here and answer questions. What we do at ReWild is we build solar farms that are normally around 30 acres in size, so not rooftop and not smaller ones, but they tend to be sort of these larger installations you might see as you drive along the highway. And the way that we interact with community solar is that we have individual Maine residents. A lot of our work is done in Maine because unfortunately New Hampshire does not have the forward-thinking governor or policy that Maine does. We offer our solar from our larger projects to individual residents. And so we refer to you guys as off-takers, which is industry jargon for people that are taking power off of our projects. And so the way that you do that is through a subscription agreement. And essentially what that means is you're subscribing through a form contract to be one of the purchasers of power from our project. Now, you guys may have heard I'm general counsel of ReWild, and so while I have outside lawyers who advise me on these agreements, I have looked over quite a few subscription agreements, and not only those forms, but sort of our master contract where we hire somebody to mail things to you guys. And those forms of contract, what we tend to look at for those is that they're sort of fair and easy to understand. There's a lot of consumer protection law around them. They need to be clear and make sure that the definitions are all in there. They need to have reasonable termination provisions, and they generally need to be something that's easy to understand. And so that's what we try to do. From our perspective as someone who's building the solar project, you guys essentially become part of how we pay back our debt for the construction financing to build our project. And so we're counting on there being enough of you, to sort of create a stable inflow of money that helps us pay our debt service. And so when you think about that, what we're generally trying to do is find a mix of people that stays around the same number and is just willing to pay for the power. And that can mean you can sign up, drop out. Hopefully we can find someone to replace you, but we're certainly not trying through community solar to count on any one of you, or if you decide it's not for you after a while to sort of come knock on your door and say, hey, why aren't you subscribed to our project anymore? It's more just sort of an understanding that there's going to be a group of individuals that makes up part of that revenue stream. So it's interesting to see it from my side, and it's super interesting for me to hear you guys are getting mailings, because again, I'm sort of on the build a solar farm side of our business, but I think it's really neat about community solar that all of a sudden, instead of us just dealing with sort of bigger businesses or just dealing with the utilities that now we sort of are able to have individuals interacting with our projects through the new Maine program. And so part of why Maine is unique in that way is, I think essentially we need to be permitted for you guys to participate with solar in that way. And so Maine has that, Massachusetts has that, New Hampshire does not have that. And it makes a difference too, because it gives you guys choices as consumers where you're getting your power. It gives you the ability to vote through your pocketbook on the kind of energy mix that you want. And, we as solar producers basically just need to know that there's people out there that are interested, because otherwise, we can't build our projects if we're not going to know how they get paid back. So I think it's kind of a neat interactive system, and I'm happy to answer more details about how it sort of pertains to you, but I guess it's always been helpful for me to sort of think of, just how the whole thing works together. And I'm going to leave it at that, and then, happy to take any questions.
So similar to how the town is saving money
Yep.
through its regional power purchase,
Yep.
Residents also save some money. Can you explain how that works typically for a typical household? How much would they save on their electric bill?
Sure. So in those sort of subscription agreements, which is the agreement by which you guys are purchasing power from the solar project, there's usually built in a discount. So that discount might be 10 or 15%. And the idea is that Maine essentially is saying to you guys, we're going to create this concept of on-bill credits. And those credits, kind of like RECs, which are renewable energy credits, these are on-bill credits that allow us as a solar producer, to sort of have a financial way to give you guys a discount and give you guys an incentive to join us on your power. And so, again, those on-bill credits are essentially created on the utility side, and they're created through the legislation. And what it really means to you is that, you're going to get your bill, and then you'll see this credit right on there, and it'll be taken off the cost of your power. I mean, it's really designed to be pretty simple from your end. There are other people who understand other more complicated pieces of it, but as far as like what goes in the agreement that's, that faces the individual subscribers, that's the key piece.
I'll ask one more question, and then maybe we'll turn it over to Fred and then open it to questions, because I think the questions could go across. But perhaps some increasing amount of pushback in some cases about where solar is being developed, large solar
Sure.
installations that have impacts on forest land or farmland, on viewscapes. And that is a concern that some people have. Obviously, there's an urgent need to transition to renewable energy. But maybe, can you talk about how you evaluate trade-offs and how we as consumers and people who are thinking about signing up for community solar might evaluate those kinds of trade-offs?
So essentially what we do is, we look at maps to try to find available parcels, and those parcels are very often places that are not useful for something else. So they are very often, gravel or sand pits that have, reached the end of their life. They could be landfills. They might be sites that sort of have wetland around them, and so they need something that can kind of fill in odd-shaped pieces, which solar does well. Maine has some incentives around sort of how we pick where our projects are, because the rates that you can kind of get compensated as a solar producer can be based on where your project is sited. And that piece of the program in Maine is still kind of evolving, but as an example, you can over time sort of incentivize in a program like this that solar is sort of focused on being this this sort of highest and best use at this stage of a parcel's life, you know? And so most places are very clear that, you know, we don't want solar built on prime farmland, and prime farmland soils is a designation that, you know, Maine has in place. You know, a lot of times view shed is really important, and for those pieces, you know, we go through, just like any other project, through a local planning board. You know, we often deal with the conversations with the abutters by making sure that we have screening or sort of a sophisticated landscaping plan around our projects. Solar is a quiet use. Once it is set up and, you know, the trucks are gone, which takes 5 or 6 months to construct, you won't hear from it. There's nobody coming in and out. There's no scheduled maintenance on a solar farm. And so, you know, there's not traffic or sort of folks coming in. We really just come visit if there's dust or too much bird poop or too much snow on the panels. So those are all kind of pieces that go into land use. I think one of the pieces that I've always found the most impactful is that acre for acre, the carbon reduction impact of solar is a factor of 300 over the trees that were there. So in other words, the carbon reduction you're going to get from an acre of trees, it multiplied by 300 when you replace it with solar, just because of the way that it is an alternative to fossil fuel production. So we try to do as little tree clearing as possible. We often leave stumps and understory in place underneath our solar projects because we don't want to disturb, you know, sort of the tree root system and the species that exist there. And then we also often accompany our solar with sort of a replanting and site stabilization that includes like pollinator-friendly mixes or native tree plantings over, you know, sort of anything foreign, of course. And those are all choices that we're continuing to make as we see the solar industry mature. I think that many of us that are involved in solar not only have a personal passion for that solar being sustainable, but I think as an industry, it's important that the industry matures in that direction and sort of is wholly sustainable in as many ways as they can be. So some fun things that I think are coming up for solar are things like not even mowing underneath our panels, but instead sort of like bringing in sheep to graze around our solar panels, you know, to sort of do what we call shade management and make sure that the undergrowth doesn't grow over the panel. So I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but those are a lot of the sort of really sensitive and careful things we do as we build.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you.